the second edition of In the Circle, presented by SFBN here on Facebook Live. I'm your host, Ari Bluestein, and thank you again for joining us for In the Circle, the only high school softball talk show about Philadelphia area high school softball here on Facebook. Thank you again for joining us. I'll bring in my co-host now, the head coach of the Chamonix softball team, Dave Ciccoletti. Dave, welcome back.
Hello, Ari. How are you? It was a great week last week. Got a lot of positive feedback. Really excited to go back into it this week.
Yes, and we've got some guests this week, which we will introduce shortly. But let's get into the Suburban One League, and of course, that's the league that you know very well. Let's start off in the Continental. What did we see this week that happened, and what do we look like in the standings in Suburban One Continental?
Well, this past week, right now, CB South and North Penn are both undefeated, and CB East has one loss. Last week, North Penn really beat up on CB East, and it kind of, asserted those two teams as the top two teams, that is CB South and North Penn. However, they played each other today, and what we thought was going to be a very close game. I think you had a score on that, Ari?
Yeah, 11-0 in 5 innings, as reported by Andrew Robinson on Twitter. That was pretty interesting to me. What are your thoughts on that? Does CB South seem like the team to beat in that division now? Certainly.
I mean, now being only undefeated team, the other two teams having one loss, I think that absolutely puts CB South in the driver's seat, and winning in such a convincing fashion against the great pitcher that North Penn has. That definitely gives them the heads up in that conference right now.
Now, in the American division, we've talked about Quakertown and Hatboro Horsham. How did they do this week, especially Quakertown? How did Quakertown do this week?
Quakertown remains 5-0. They had games versus Upper Moreland and Cheltenham, and they won both of those games pretty easily. Hatboro Horsham also beat Cheltenham. They beat Pennsbury in a extra inning thriller. It was a great game, but they had a big loss to CB South. That game was 21-17. And I know that I've read some reports and I've read some things. I know that Hatboro Horsham was really upset with the way that their defense was going. They made a lot of changes. I don't think anybody wants to be playing football game like scores in softball. So right now, Quakertown remains in the driver's seat. Hatboro Horsham 1 game back. And Upper Dublin, believe it or not, is 4-1. But something tells me that they may be benefiting from the schedule playing out the right way. I think that they had the easier part of their schedule, and they've yet to get, to really face Quakertown and Hatboro Horsham.
Well, I'm seeing, did they lose to Quakertown by a significant margin? I believe.
It might have been like 21-10.
Oh, wow.
Might even been worse, yeah.
A lot of high scores. These sound like football scores, Dave. What's going on here?
I look at that conference, and every week I see some of the numbers they put up. They have some very good athletes, some very big hitters I know that are going to D1 programs.
And you said that on Varsity Voice when you came on our TV show on the Comcast Network. You said they have some really good hitters in this division. So very interesting in the American. Now we'll get to the national here. Obviously, again, this is the division that you know the best. This is these are the teams that you play. I know you guys had a pretty tough week last week. How did you guys do?
Well, last week we had to play Pennsbury and Council Rock North, and then we had a non-league game versus Souderton. We defeated Pennsbury 10-0, and then we came back out 2 days later and beat our rival at North. Both of us were undefeated at the time. It was a great game. It was a 4-2 game. So that, again, we are the only team in the national now with one loss. So, again, kind of like CB South, that gives us a nice advantage. But it's nothing, not to get too excited about. You still have to play every game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, congratulations on a great week.
Thank you.
Those are basically your two rivals, knocked them off in the same week. So you're alone in first place, and you defeated Truman today. 14-6, I believe, was the score, Dave?
Yes, we had a pretty good offensive showing today against Truman. A little bit left to be desired in the field, but very happy the way that we hit the ball today versus Truman.
How about the rest of the division? Got the wins over Pennsbury and CR North, and they're obviously going to be around.
So
what else did you have going on in the division?
So now Pennsbury and CR North both have one loss. CR North had a win last week after us. They beat Abington, and Pennsbury had a big win against CR South. So that puts CR South with 2 losses in the league. So you have us in first with no losses. Now it's North and Pennsbury with 1, and it knocks CR South back just a little bit on the outside looking in. And then Ben Salem somehow didn't play a game last week. Even though they don't have a conference win yet, They still have a winning overall record. And right now, I looked on the District 1 website. I still believe they're the 20th or 21st team, which, a 500 record can still get you into districts.
Yeah, that's interesting. We so far here on In the Circle, we've really just broken it down by division in Suburban 1. We've kind of alluded to the District 1 standings a little bit, but I think maybe next week we'll bring in those District 1 standings and kind of get like a mid-season look and see where teams stand. What do you think about that, Dave?
I think that's a great idea, and then we'll be able to see, who are all the powers in the whole District 1, and we can see where our SOL teams are kind of falling into that picture.
Well, we'll take a look at that again. That's next week. This is the second episode of In the Circle. We'll roll on weekly here during the softball season. Before we get into our guests, Dave, we've got, obviously we like to look ahead at some of the big games of the week. And I know last week there were a ton of great games. What do you have on the docket for this week that we should really look out for?
Well, the first game is that the one we just spoke about was North Penn and CB South. And then we said that CB South took control of that league. There was another good game today with Ben Salem and Council Rock South. And the third game I was looking at is Pennsbury actually played CR North. So I'm excited to see how those games went today, because that's also going to see how our conference, the National, is going to lay after this week. There are some big intra-conference games. On Tuesday, CB South plays CB East. Like I said, CB East had lost a tough game to North Penn, so they're going to look back, to bounce back, and that should be an exciting game. And Quakertown and PW. PW is a team that we haven't talked about a lot. I think that PW may be that next one. Looking at those standings again, District 1, PW is just on the outside looking in. Right. So that's a big game for PW. If they could come and they could knock off Quakertown, you know what I mean? That would be a big move for them as far as playoffs go.
For sure.
And then on Wednesday, we have a Catholic League SOL matchup where Ryan is going to play CR North. So we'll get an idea of, of how powerful Ryan is, and it should be a great game. And we also have, we play CR South on Wednesday. So that should also be a very entertaining game. I know they have a young pitcher that a lot of people are talking about, and I'm very excited to get that game and to get to that game and play it.
Yeah, that really should be very, very interesting there, Dave.
Lose us to Thursday? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, the bottom line is it's this next week. It's this week,
yes.
And it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of great softball to look out for. And you mentioned Archbishop Bryan. We're going to get into the Philadelphia Catholic League a little bit later, but right now I want to bring in our two guests here on In the Circle. Again, you're watching our second episode here on Facebook Live. And a reminder, before we introduce our guests, you can go to our website, www.thesfbn.com. We have links to all of our past shows of Varsity Voice, which aired on the Comcast network, all of our past broadcasts, what we have coming up, all our fresh content, our great photos, and continue to follow us right here on Facebook and also on Twitter at @the_SFBN. So without further ado, let's bring in our guests, two players who are coached by our co-host Dave Ciccoletti over at Neshaminy. We have senior Devin Mashuli and junior Alexis Watkins. Welcome to In the Circle. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
I want to talk to Alexis first. You're the junior, but so far a great season. And last week, 2 big wins. Just talk about what it was like getting those wins over Pennsbury and CR North. Basically, your 2 biggest tests in league so far.
We knew we had to come out strong with both games, and that's exactly what we did. We put up runs when we needed to at the perfect times, which we were struggling with before that, but we really put it together.
And so far, you're undefeated in league play, 5-0, 9-2 overall. You had a couple of early losses, against Pine Grove and Wilson West Lawn, but I think overall, it feels like as a team, you guys are coming together. Talk about the season so far and how you guys have progressed since the beginning of the year.
In the beginning of the year, we got runners on base, and then we struggled with getting them home to score. But for the games that we needed to win, we really brought our intensity up to do that. And now, ever since we played Pennsbury, that's all we're doing.
And Devin, I want to bring you in now here. You're the senior, headed to Millersville next year. Congratulations on that, by the way. Looking ahead, Dave mentioned about the tough game that you have coming up this week. Talk about how this team, kind of piggyback off of Alexis here, how this team has come together and what your outlook is for the rest of the year.
This year, we have we've done a really good job with keeping our intensity level up. That's a key factor in winning games. You have to have everyone on the bench and playing in the game involved. And playing perfect defense is something that's also another huge key factor into winning games. And everything's worked out pretty far for the first half of the year or half of the season. So hopefully we can continue that into the rest of the season and hopefully all the way to states.
And you know, Dave and I just discussed about all the great teams that are in Suburban One, not just in your national division, but the great offense in the American. And we just saw CB South with a big win over North Penn. You've played in this league now your entire high school career. What's it like playing in this great Suburban One league, one of the best softball leagues in this area?
Well, because we're in Neshaminy, we are definitely a number one target for a lot of teams. So it's something really, it's an honor to play on such a high level competitive team, and it feels good to have everyone kind of coming after you and being the head of the Suburban One. So it's definitely been an honor being a senior and capturing SOL champs for the past 3 years or. So,
So you guys like the targets. You guys like the targets on your back.
It definitely makes you perform 10 times better than I think you normally would. It's all about intensity and you want to defend your title. So that's what we're here to do.
That's awesome. Well, Alexis, Devin, thank you again so much for joining us here on In the Circle right here on Facebook Live.
Thank you. This was exhilarating. Thank you.
Awesome. It was great to have you. And then the first time that we're having guests here on In the Circle, Devin Mashuli Sr. and Alexis Watkins Jr. from Neshaminy. And we'll have some other guests here on In the Circle as we roll forward. Again, this is the second episode right here on Facebook Live as we bring back in our co-host, Dave Ciccoletti. Dave, your players like to have the targets on their back. How about that?
It's good to be the king of the castle. You know, you want people to have to come in and take what you earned, and we don't mind, you know what I mean, defending and not having to climb that uphill battle. I love it.
And, you know, speaking of having a target on their backs, I think Archbishop Ryan, you alluded to them a little bit earlier. They are kind of the Neshaminy of the Catholic League, if you will. They've had a lot of success in the Philadelphia Catholic League, and they've got a big test. We talked about it coming up this week. I know that they had that early season loss to Cardinal O'Hara, but right now that's their only loss, and they're 5-1. What do you think of the Ragdolls, and how excited are you to see them match up against a good Suburban One team to see where they are at?
I think that'll be a huge test, like I said, for the Ragdolls. I know myself that it's going to be a tough battle for them. You know, Jenna Kansian pitched really well against us the other day, and I don't know if, other than maybe Archbishop Wood's pitcher, I don't know if anyone else in the Catholic League has pitching at that level, and it's going to be a very, very good challenge for them. I don't know if they have an Alexis Watkins to hit a 2-run homer early in that game to give your team some confidence and breathing room.
I love that, the shout out to your players who were just in studio with us. Thank you. I wanted to talk about Archbishop Wood as well, because we talked about them on the first episode of In the Circle. They were ranked number 1 and they were undefeated, but they didn't really face any tests yet. Well, they beat O'Hara 1-0 and Bonner Prendy 2-0. I mean, we're not sure about their lineup right now, but you just alluded to their pitching.
And they beat Council Rock North.
Yeah, I mean, that is really impressive. Maybe the Vikings are the real deal. What do you think at this point?
I would say from everything that I saw, I haven't had an opportunity to see them in person, but you know, all the statistics and all the scores and everything, in my opinion, I think they're the team to beat. You know, it should be a great battle between them and Ryan, but right now, all the evidence says that Wood is the team to beat.
Yeah, and they, as you mentioned, Wood and Ryan play each other on April 25th. And Ryan's got a tough test with Hubert. That's always the great Northeast Philly rivalry. And, you know, Hubert actually beat Cardinal O'Hara, so it was a tough week for Cardinal O'Hara. Hubert actually beat Little Flower, another little rivalry, Little Flower in that area, in the Northeast area. But to me, just looking at this, because last week we thought O'Hara was the top team, but Lansdale Catholic, Bonner Prendy, they're in the mix a little bit too. It's all jumbled up in the PCL right now.
And I've seen Conwell Egan play some really good games as well. So, I mean, when you play in league and you're familiar with all the players, there's no easy test, and it's really difficult. It's kind of early on. You only played through once. You know, they know each other well, and there's rivalries, and you don't know really who's going to be that top team. But there's a lot of options.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just rattled through all the teams. It's going to be very interesting. Another interesting week in the PCL. We'll see if O'Hara can bounce back.
I did have one other thing to mention. A very important game. We did the PCL and the SOL. There's a very important game this week in the BAL. So I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my hometown where I work. Bristol plays their rival, Christopher Dock.
Okay.
So that's in the past couple of years. Bristol has won the BAL crown. The last time they lost it was to Christopher Dock. So that's a big game for them this week, playing their rival. And I have to give a shout out to senior Tiana Brewington, who collected her 100th hit of her career.
Wow.
100 career hits, I think it gets overlooked. That is really the true mark in high school softball. To have 100 hits, you have to average 25 hits a season, and you have to play for 4 seasons. So you have to be a freshman. You have to be a very good freshman. So I'd like to congratulate her on that feat.
Yeah, not easy. And you play all 4 years, but still you don't play a ton of games.
You play 20.
At the high school level. Yeah, that's really not a lot to get 100 hits. So that is quite an accomplishment. And I remember when we talked about the BAL on Varsity Voice, you thought Bristol was certainly the favorite, but Christopher Dock, their rival, they could potentially give them a run. So that should be a very interesting game. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Dave.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Again, we're continuing on here within the circle. And remember to check out our website, www.thesfbn.com, for all information about SFBN. And a reminder again, we'll be back next week. We may change the day a little bit, so make sure you check out our Facebook page and our Twitter handle at @the_SFBN to see when the next edition of In the Circle will be. I'll be back here on Facebook Live on Wednesday with Q&A, so make sure you use the hashtag AskAriBlue if you want to ask me any questions, lacrosse, baseball, softball, whatever you would like. Thank you again for joining us here on In the Circle, presented by SFBN here on Facebook Live. Tune in next week. Until then, have a good night.